People come in and they can always ask questions.
Absolutely. All right. Good morning. At least it's morning my time on the West Coast. This is Gino Gianola. I'm the chair of the new Ethics Council, and we have put together this webinar to bring people up to speed on the brand new Ethics Code of Ethics for PAEA. This code has increased our policies and procedures manual by 1/3. Anyhow, ethics, I think, both bioethics and ethics in general, is all contextual. You have principles, but there is a context in which ethical dilemmas are addressed. However, context is important, and in that, I'd like to introduce myself, a little bit of background so you know who I am and why in the world I have decided to chair this Ethics Council. I'm married for a little over 30 years. Esther and we were married in Carmel. I have 2 sons, one in Hollywood, the other one is working in the field of biology. I come from a line of strong women and who have provided me with my moral compass. This is my grandmother, great-grandmother. I have 2 dogs. The one on the left is Hope. The one on the right is Zoe. And annually, Esther and I go to Hawaii every year in February because the Northwest is very cold and wet. So that's who I am. And the reason I got into the issues of ethics was started in Vietnam when I was a corpsman there. And it evolved through 1980 when I was at the National Cancer Institute and starting some very early research on a virus, on an infection that we had no idea what it was. It ended up being HIV/AIDS virus, and watching the progression of this infection over the last few decades has reinforced my interest in dealing with ethical issues. And just last year, I finished graduate school focusing on bioethics and humanities. So, let's get started. The PAEA Executive Committee was concerned about conflict of interest. There is a misspelling. Anyway, in January of 2010, one of the executive committee members came to ask me what I thought of helping work on a ethics committee, development of an ethics committee for PAEA. Shortly after that, in July of 2010, the board of PAEA put together an ethics work group. I was part of that, and we met from July 2010 to August 2011, developing some process for creating an ethics committee, which is now an ethics council. The members of that ethics work group were Patricia Dieter, who was chair. I was a member, Christine Healy, Patricia Hogue, and Keith Moore. We met about 6 times over the year to help develop some ideas for creating the committee. And our charge was to review and refine or develop, where appropriate, policies related to the core values, core ethics, conflict of interest, and private benefit inurement. The work group will recommend a structure and process for the Standing Ethics Committee. So that's what we did from through August of 2011. In 2012, the Ethics Council committee at that time was created, and the members of that council now are myself as chair, Deborah Nichols from Red Rock, Ralph Rice from Florida, PA program there in Gainesville, Francine Butler, who is the public member, and PAEA has not had a public member in the past on any committee, so she has been very helpful. She's worked on issues of organizational ethics, especially in healthcare. And we also have Joyce Neiman, who is from the University of Colorado, Mike Murphy, who is a physician at Harding University in Arkansas, Deb Opik, who is the program director at the University of Pittsburgh, Jennifer Snyder, who is a board member who is at Butler University and was very active in our process of this new committee, our council. And we also have Rebecca Volpe, who is from Penn State, who is a bioethicist and is in the program in Pennsylvania. So, the PAEA Code of Ethics really has a purpose, which is to provide the principles and standards of conduct by which PA Education Association elected and appointed volunteer leaders, including member programs, adhere to and interact with PAEA. The intention of the PAEA Code of Ethics is to set forth expectations about how PAE members and leaders are to conduct themselves when interacting with PAEA and as a PAEA member. And that is the purpose of the new Code of Ethics. Professional excellence is important and is spelled out within the code. And it is what all professionals do, act with integrity, with academic standards when developing professional educational materials for PAE, and to conduct oneself in a professional manner. Pretty standard stuff. Expectations to interact with or on the behalf of PAEA, applicable to federal laws, and to refrain from using our association, PAEA, for personal gain or private procurement. The charge that the Ethics Council has is fairly simple. We are charged with upholding the code, developing resources to educate members, leaders, and PAEA staff about the code, and reviewing and disclosure forms. A part of our effort is to review perceived and actual ethical violations and code on conflict of interest. The Ethics Council shall, as necessary, determine if there has been a violation of the code. Conflict of interest has been one of the real drivers for creating the council, and that evolved from the Oxley-Sarbanes legislation about 5 years ago, and nonprofits have been are addressed in that piece of legislation, and most nonprofits now have an ethics committee or ethics group to address issues of conflict of interest, even within the nonprofit world. What we are going to be doing this year, starting with the dues process next year, is having the program director will sign off a checklist that they have let all the members of their faculty know that the Code of Ethics exists and have access to that, and would adhere to this code. Conflict of interest, as I said, was the real issue, one of the real issues as a driver for the Ethics Council. And under the law, there is a duty of loyalty that requires nonprofit leaders to act in the interests of their organization, in fact, PAEA, and not in conflict with those interests for personal gain, commercial interests, financial enrichment of themselves or individuals, or in order to maintain this integrity, legal compliance, well-being, and reputation of PAEA with its membership and the public as not being influenced by the individual corporation or interests in its philosophy, decision-making, and other actions. It's important for PAEA members and leaders to be supportive of the organization and fulfill their duties identifying, addressing, and resolving actual and perceived conflict of interest. And disclosure, transparency, I think, is of utmost importance. Conflict of interest does not mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing, especially if it is addressed. If it is addressed, and most conflict of interest, the majority of conflict of interest, can be managed in a number of ways. But it is important that there is transparency so that all of us know that there may be a conflict of interest. Much of this conflict of interest issues really focuses on the leadership of PAEA, especially when it comes to products that PAEA produces, and that none of the members of the board of directors or our councils are have a conflict of interest. We will be having disclosure forms, as we have had in the past, and those will be on the website, so there won't be paper going all around. And we will create a database to look at the conflict of interest forms. And in those forms, a list of external positions and relationships that might identify any conflict of interest. Anyone within or outside PAEA who has a concern about a perceived or actual conflict of interest shall advise the Ethics Council by submitting a submittal form, which one will find in the Code of Ethics once we put that up online. There will also be a link for folks who are thinking of running for an office as they disclose, as they put their eligibility forward. There will be a link so that folks can at least peruse the Code of Ethics. Board members and council chairs of councils really have even more responsibility. The board specifically cannot serve as site visitors for accreditation for RPA. And they shouldn't serve on a board or a commission or similar positions at the National Commission or Certification of PAs, the NCCPA Foundation, National Commission on Certification, or in any of review or any of the physician assistant committees with the AAPA. And shall not serve in positions that are directly related to PAEA products, such as testing products, and shall not serve as legal consultants or an expert witness for a case while they are on board. So the Ethics Committee will review those forms, and staff will actually review the forms and forward them to the Ethics Committee if there is a concern. We actually have a protocol, that a checkoff list for staff to be able to look at the application forms and see if they believe there is a conflict of interest, and if so, refer it to the council. And the council will look at it and see if there are unmanageable conflicts of interest. The person can, meaning that the person cannot be considered for an appointment at PAEA due to that conflict of interest. The majority will be manageable conflicts of interest. The person is notified that certain actions shall be considered necessary in the event of an appointment as a PAEA leader, such as not voting on specific issues that may be directly related to potential conflict of interest. There's a whole section within the code on if there is a violation of the code, or there is a process in which one can present a complaint, and we go through a specific process for addressing that complaint. Those forms also will be linked online for folks to be able to look at. The Ethics Council Chair, in consultation with the CEO, and if needed, legal counsel, shall determine whether the complaint is a frivolous or unfounded complaint, can be readily addressed or resolved, or merits review by the Ethics Council. There is an appeals process if the person believes that they have not violated the code, and you can all read that, and I'm not going to read through the whole thing there. And the board and the Ethics Council does make recommendations to the board, and the board has the final say regarding alleged violations of the code or alleged violations by the CEO of the corporation. So board of directors, as I said, and council chairs really have a higher level of responsibility than general membership. We spoke about violations of the code and the hearing if, in fact, there is a violation of the code, and there's a process for that. Again, we can look through that in the Code of Ethics, and there is an appeals process. So that, in short, is the Code of Ethics in a short review. I'm not sure that if you all have been able to look at the Code of Ethics. I don't know if it has been posted yet, but it will be. If not yet, it will be shortly. The Code of Ethics is a living document, and changes are expected all the time. Not all the time, but changes are expected as we evolve and develop. As PAEA has expanded from when I was first a member of like 14 programs to now almost 180 programs. And with that rapid expansion, codifying the Code of Ethics was rather important. But as we learn things, as we move along, as we address issues, this document is not in stone. In fact, it is living, and we expect there will be changes. And as I said, all ethical dilemmas are contextual. I teach my students that there are some principles in ethics, but each ethical dilemma is unique, may have similar issues, but the context around them make them. So, I'm going to go sailing later today. That's not what I look like now. That's what I looked like a number of years ago. So, are there any questions out there in this very short presentation?
And the phones are unmuted, so if anybody wants to ask a question, please go ahead.
Oh, a quick question. This is Jim
Sure.
Van Reed from Yale University.
Yes.
Could you talk more about you talked in detail about the conflict of interest in the code related to the leadership of PAEA. What about its members, the member organizations? What if the membership, a program or a faculty member within a program has what's perceived as a conflict of interest against by PAEA's eyes? How does that affect the program membership?
The members of PAE are programs.
Right.
The faculty within those programs, when faculty members are interacting or are representing PAEA, the code and the conflict of interest is period. But if one is a member and is not on a committee, is not on a board, is not on a council, or any other elected position, of course, members they're acting in the interest of their university, do whatever they want. I mean, write books, write questions.
That's not the way it reads in the policy. It can be interpreted as that if the members don't follow these principles, the membership could be lost.
Well, that is not what
I don't have the document in front of me right now,
right.
But there's a bulleted point area about the membership, loyalty to PAEA, and there's a couple of other statements there that lead me to believe that if the member program were, let's say a member program were to decide to start a admissions portal thing, like similar to CASPA, and none of the program members are members of anything, or they decide to do exams, or whatever the case may be, a product that's similar to what PAEA produces. If a member program were to do that, if none of the PA program faculty or anybody else is on any of those committees, the PA program is free and clear to do whatever they want to do.
That's true.
Okay. Because that's not the way it reads, at least the way I interpret it. I've had some other people look at it too, and they seem to think that it could be interpreted either way as well.
You may have looked at an old copy. This has gone through.
I read the one that was sent out with this webinar invitation. So that's the last one I read. Okay.
Well, if you can email me what sections of your concern, I'll be glad to respond to that.
Be glad to.
But it is meant. And if it's unclear, we need to go back, as this is a living document, and make it clear that conflict of interest specifically relates to leadership or members individual members that are part of, say, writing test questions for end of rotation exams. And that person may also be writing something for another book company.
Right.
That would be a conflict of interest.
Yeah,
so
I get that part. That part's easy.
Sorry? I'm sorry?
That part's easy. I get that part. It was the part about the membership that I was confused with.
Okay. Just send me the sections that you're concerned with, and we will either change those, or I can respond to you, or one of our members can.
Okay.
I'd be glad to do that.
I have another question. I don't know where this one goes, but I mean, you could technically perceive that being a program director and being on the board, by virtue of being a program director, that's a conflict of interest, because as a membership program, I'm trusting the board is going to make decisions that are in best interest of the membership in general. But how do I know for sure that they're being a program director of a program that the decisions they're making are actually in the best interest of the membership and not of their individual program?
Well, we always look at membership programs as individuals as having their cup is full of virtue, and they are working in the best interest of their institution and the best interest of PAEA. And with a full virtuous cup, one can lose that if there is a direct conflict of interest between PAEA and that member program. That has not happened in all the years that I have been part.
So let's say for
yes.
example, the board member, a decision that they're going to vote on would directly affect their program. Would they recuse themselves from that vote? Would
Yes.
that be what would
Yes.
be suggested from them, or would they have to step down
Yes.
as being an entire board member?
It depends on the issue. But as I say, transparency is important, and that may be a manageable conflict of interest, and they would not vote on it, and in some cases they may have to leave the room when those discussions are happening. But it certainly depends. As I say, it's contextual. It depends on the issue, and it is. Many members of the board have been or will be program directors.
Of course.
And in fact, that's how we all started back in the APAP days.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I haven't been around quite that long, but I've been around quite a while. With the conflict of interest, I don't disagree with the conflict of interest idea at all, not whatsoever. I mean, having served on the ARC and served as a commissioner and as chair, making decisions about programs, we took that very seriously, and people would leave rooms who had any linkage to a program, even if it was a next door neighbor program. We erred on the side of always people not being involved in those decision-making processes. It just seems like with a lot of the things coming down the road here with PAEA, that instead of trying to, and I'm glad to hear you say that you would be willing to manage conflicts of interest, it seemed like there was a lot of times that it was just easier to just eliminate that person from the position or whatever the case may have been, instead of trying to manage the conflict and trusting people that are working for organizations and working for institutions that they're going to act in an ethical manner and recuse themselves when they note that there's a conflict of interest. It seems like in the past it was really an all or nothing. Either remove yourself entirely from this outside endeavor, or if you don't, you can't be a member of any of these boards. There was never I could see a situation where you could have somebody who's maybe on the board who is involved with, let's say, for example, they worked for Exam Master or something, or whatever, one of those other places that does board review questions. They could easily recuse themselves from any of those decision-making processes and still serve very well on the board and help in other areas. But it seems like in the past, those people were just either told to walk away entirely from their outside endeavor. They could be on the board, but there's got to be a way to be able to do both things. So I'm afraid we're going to lose a lot of very good leaders. Most people in PA education who are really good at what they do have their hands in multiple pots. I mean, I think back to the days with Dennis Oliver and those guys. I mean, they were doing multiple things. And I look back at the list of past presidents and I think, some of these guys would have never been able to run because of other things they were doing now. It seems like we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
As I say, I think there are manageable and unmanageable conflicts of interest, and it's all contextual. And we have tried to put together a document that kind of addresses that. But it comes down to if specific products are in conflict with what PAEA is doing, and the board member or the candidate has a significant financial investment in another product, that may be considered an unmanageable conflict of interest. But as I say, it's all contextual. I mean, the bottom line is, how would it look if it was printed in the front page of the Washington Post? That's how I look at transparency. Can we uphold?
Hopefully you just don't read the headline. Hopefully you read the story that goes behind the headline to get the detail, because headlines could be misleading. But I get your point. The other part of that is, what if somebody is on the board and they're entrepreneurial, they have something out there, whatever it is, product XYZ, that's a great thing. It's a way to remediate students or do whatever, and they've developed this. And now all of a sudden PAEA decides to get into that side of the game and develop their own product. What happens to that person then if they're on the board at the time? Would they have to then step down from the board because PAEA decided to develop a similar product?
I would assume if that board member is an active board member, they would be part of those discussions and make it apparent that they have another product that would be in conflict with this. And I think it would be up to the rest of the board and the EC to address that issue.
Okay.
As I say, it's all contextual.
Right. Oh, yeah. I mean, I can give you as many case scenarios. I mean, I used to do the same thing you do. I taught ethics, and you can look at 4 different things involving the same overriding concept, but all 4 cases are entirely different and are handled entirely different ways. So
that's correct.
That every case is unique. So
Yep.
It's really
That's
hard.
what's fun about ethics.
Well, yeah. That's what's fun about medicine. No patient's exactly the same. So it's the same thing, yeah. Okay.
All right. Any other questions out there? That's awfully quiet. All right. Well, we'll be doing
Maybe
this
I'm the
again.
only one on.
Maybe so.
There's at least somebody down here in Florida.
Oh, leave it to
I
the Florida
hear that
person.
well.
Yeah, well, you're probably sitting outside in the sun doing this, so.
105 degrees.
Yeah.
Oy. Well, I think we are going to do
Gino?
another one. Yes.
This is Chris Bruce calling.
Well, hi, Chris.
The part. Hi, how are you, Gino? The part that Jim is referring to is written. It says leader or member for conflict of interest, and I think that's where the issue becomes. It says a conflict of interest for a PAEA member or leader, and that's where the gray area becomes, because if you interpret it as it says, if I'm a member of PAEA and I have something that could be perceived as a conflict, then that could take me out of membership. And I really don't think that's what the intent of what you're trying to say is.
Can you tell me where that is in the?
Yes, well, I have it bolded on the. It's under COI disclosure policy, and it's a new bullet, a COI for a PAEA member or leader under this policy is defined as any material impediment to being loyal to PAEA, any situation that could predispose or bias you in any manner other than being completely supportive of the material interests of PAEA. And I think that's what that Jim is referring to. And I think I'm on the Leadership Development Recruitment Council, and I was at a conference call directly before this, and I know that the Ethics Committee is going to be part of the vetting process for candidates. And at this point, I don't recall us talking about manageable conflicts of interest. And I think Jim was correct in saying that there were people excluded from running for PAEA based on conflict of interest, and manageable conflict of interest was never part of those discussions.
Then,
I can tell you that when I ran this by the Yale Legal Counsel here, they asked me what a member was, and I said, well, the program is a member of PAEA, and they said, well, we would have a really hard time letting you sign this as a program because your loyalty is to the institution, not to this organization. And Yale Legal Counsel are really kind of snooty about stuff like that, being Yale and all. So it stays members. We're not going to be able to sign, according to the legal counsel here.
It's passed by our legal counsel. We'll send it back and ask them. It's only, I mean, this only refers to when you're acting as within PAEA.
Right. They had a problem with the words member. It made it sound, because then the definition of member is the program. So it made it sound like the program was pledging these bullet points to PAEA. And that's where they had the issue with. It's what the rest of it, the conflict of interest, they thought was actually quite good. It was that it could be interpreted that you were implying the program had to follow those specific code of ethics, which was really limiting a program's ability to be entrepreneurial or to do things, or its faculty to grow and develop for promotion and tenure.
Right.
One of the things that gets us promoted and tenured here at Yale is doing those types of outside activities, entrepreneurial type things. And I'm sorry, but I think my promotion and tenure at Yale is more important than being a member of PAEA. I hate to tell you that.
Well, that's probably true.
Yeah.
Our legal counsel.
That's where our counsel. I could see where the legal counsel here said that, oh, we could see where it could go both ways, but they had a very hard time with it saying member, where it could be broadly interpreted as being any program, any program that is a member of PAEA. If it's really what you're meaning is the leadership of PAEA, then they felt that that's what it should say. It shouldn't have anything to do with a member. So if a faculty member is out there who's on no committee, does nothing, shows up at the conference, and that's it, participates in the educational process, but they were to write questions or develop an admissions portal or do whatever, our legal counsel said, well, would that get the program pulled from being a member, conflict of interest? And I said, well, and they were afraid that the way it was worded, that was what it would mean. So I think you just need to take out the word member.
Well, I will pass that. I will. That has been, yes. I will talk to the board of directors and see what they think, and I'll talk to our EC members, and we will again. It's been referred to council a couple times, but I will ask council again what they think.
And unless you put in there somewhere, the other thing they recommended here was that somewhere you define member. But they said if you define member as being a program and you're asking them to do these things, the one, I only ran it by the legal guy here briefly. We had like 10, 15 minutes to talk, so he only looked at that section. He's glanced through it all, but he looked at that section where I had the concern. And he said that it would be very hard for Yale University to allow me to check that box that says we're going to follow these things, where if it says we as a member program have to put our loyalty towards PAEA first and foremost, which is kind of the way it almost interprets that anything we do that conflicts could have us lose our membership. That was their concern, because they didn't know what the word member meant.
Yep, that's why there's laws in courts.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. And of course, the law is the lowest bar of morality. As I say again, we'll pass it by EC, and at least I'll talk to at least one of the executive committee members and see what they think.
Gino, Chris Bruce again. I have another question. What authority does the Ethics Council have? I know that there is a formal policy for lodging an ethics complaint. If a program is found to be in violation of the Code of Ethics, I'm not talking conflict of interest, I'm talking about an ethical violation, what authority or what kinds of sanctions does the Ethics Committee actually have?
The sanctions are made by, there are suggestions of, there are recommendations of sanctions, but the board of directors actually, it's actually up to them to make that final decision.
So from another tier of that ethics, say on just a theoretical basis, a program is found to be in a clear ethics violation, and the Ethics Committee makes a recommendation to have a program sanction, but then the board sees if they would throw that program out or suspend that program, then that fiduciary responsibility of the board, they may have a conflict of that because say it has to deal with membership, you're not getting the membership fees, you're not getting the CASPA dues, doesn't the board in a way have a conflict in sanctioning, maybe dismissing a program from a participating in the end of rotation exams, in the PACRAT exam, where there are financial ramifications if the program, say CASPA, the program no longer participates, that's going to hurt the bottom line of PAEA, and isn't there maybe a conflict if they would choose to dismiss a program?
It's like, no, it's like any other leadership position in which decisions have to be made about the organization and about its membership. Somebody has to make the final decision, and these are the elected leaders, and they do have that responsibility to the corporation, to the association.
Okay.
I mean, it's like, well, yeah, somebody has to make the decision, and it is our elected leadership.
So the Ethics Committee makes a recommendation.
Yes, after it, I mean, it goes through the whole thing of hearings and a review panel and an appeals process. But the final decision, the recommendations go to the board, and they make that final decision. But there's a long process if there is concern about a violation. It can go on for a while.
It's Jim again. Just a logistics question. So this is going to be brought up. Does this just be approved by the board, or does this have to go to the membership for a vote?
What the
policy, the override, the whole.
No, it's in fact in force. It is now part of our policies and procedures manual. Policies and procedures do not go to the membership for a vote. In fact, anyway, it does not.
Okay.
It's the board approves or disapproves or all policies, and all policies are reviewed on an annual basis as well.
Right. So somebody could now file an ethical or a conflict of interest thing now. I mean, it could happen. You could get one right after this conference.
Yeah, that's probably true.
That was my question. I didn't know when this went into effect. I didn't know if this was something that was going to be sent out to the masses or not.
No, it is. It went into effect, I believe, in August. No, this is August. At the last board meeting, they approved it, and we have not placed it within the policy. We the council have asked not to have it placed in the policies and procedures manual. So after these webinars, and I think that Sean will be putting this up on, if it's not already, on the internet, on the website, because I think although this is policies and procedures, it's a living document, I hope there's a lot of dialogue about it so people understand what it is. And I think it's supposed to go up shortly so everybody can see it. And in October, we, the council, will be doing a presentation on it as well. Okay?
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions? Awfully quiet.